Guess you feel you'll always be.
Every day, many of us look at ourselves, and when we see the person in front of us, we dream of the person we could be. Because what makes a man? Not in a biological sense, but in a moral one. It might be a strange issue to open a video about a 70s love story about boxing, but I believe the film in a sense answers that question with its protagonist Rocky Balboa. So, what do I mean by that question? Many would have you believe that being a man is about being dominant and aggressive, being someone who shouldn't be messed with and plays with violence. Others think it's about being decent and respectful, treating others as if you're the example they should live by or aspire to. Or perhaps it's many other things. The truth is, no one really knows anymore. The answer itself might be the problem. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and if you do believe that, it helps us explain the calamity masculinity is in at the moment. Why is it then that men are often related to certain characteristics? The idea of being strong, confident, a leader, you name it. See, what people tend to forget when they answer that question with those characteristics is why you need those supposed things in the first place. Obviously, it's so you can be a good man, but they forget the initial question. Put simply, why be a good man? What is the purpose of being a good man? Once again, many would answer for love, protection, or becoming something like a father or loyal husband for others. So it could be all of these things, or perhaps it's none of them. It's hard to say. Then why present the problem? And make no mistake, it's a problem. Well, by answering that question, what is the purpose of being a man? Why are men needed in the first place? Then what is required to be a man becomes obvious. That's the question I intend to present an answer for. There's a certain titular character who explores the male crisis and offers solutions. Rocky from 1976. So why Rocky? Well, with the Rocky franchise now spanning 9 movies, you can be forgiven for thinking the series is that over-the-top action underdog movies about boxing. Hell, the latest one, Creed 3, doesn't even have the character in it anymore. And who can blame you, as that eccentric nature of the later films made them so memorable. Rocky is basically fighting a Russian supervillain by the 4th movie, with the 6th film, Rocky Balboa, although half-felt and tonally much better than the last 3 sequels, still has Rocky fighting the current heavyweight champion at 60. Masculinity is often not taken seriously and is treated not as a real problem that needs tackling. So when trying to answer what is a near universal problem that already has a stigma attached, I can see how using this almost cartoon version of hypermasculine men in this franchise might be looked as ridiculous and in bad faith. To be clear, the film's message got lost along the way. It was about reaching your own potential, not the potentials others aspire for you. Rocky has nothing to prove internally for the bulk of the franchise, and only fights because it looks good really. For an example, in the 4th film, Rocky doesn't want Apollo to fight because both are past their prime, and why take the risk when there's so much to lose? Not just for themselves but for their loved ones as well. This is very in line with Rocky early on as a character, and is the truth Apollo needs to hear. Age catches up with us all. Shamefully, Apollo's pride and ego gets the better of him, with him not giving the sport of boxing the respect it deserves, and in turn gets himself killed. Why? So he can feel like a warrior again? With his wife and Rocky to pick up the pieces? Nobody learned anything, nobody gained anything. So it's absolutely shocking Rocky goes against his own humble values to prove some very uncaring Russians wrong. It's a ludicrous plot that ruins characters, not adds to them. This is one of the many reasons why I never liked the Creed films and the majority of the Rocky films' plots, although I have to admit they're quite entertaining. With that said, let me make the case for the first movie. If you haven't seen any of the films, only going off how they're talked about and treated in pop culture, it might surprise you that the original 1976 original won Best Picture. Also, by just how sad that first movie is. While it's got a triumphant last quarter, the film has the soft loneliness that permeates throughout the movie, very similar to a serious drama. While it's easy to explain this by delving into the making of the movie, with how Sylvester Stallone's life so closely matched Rocky's at the time, it's pretty well known, and with its 50th anniversary not too far away, it's by now well overstated. We all know Rocky's the ultimate underdog story after all, but why is the original special? As you know, Rocky has been rehashed a bunch, not at least by its own franchise. While many people can favourite the original of something because it's created the idea, often the truth is, The idea is done much better in subsequent media, as the concept gets perfected over time. Rocky I do think is the exception, while I don't believe a film with the same ambitions has done it better, or at the very least as poignantly, with Rocky the character striving to become a good man, or at the very least a better man throughout the film. Before we begin, it needs to be said that I think the film has serious audio problems. This was the first use of Steadicam, and apparently it generated a lot of noise. Suffice it to say, it can be very hard to hear what characters are saying in certain scenes, so subtitles are a must for new viewers of the film. With that out of the way, let's analyse how Rocky treats men and masculinity. I'll set the stage. Rocky Balboa is a well-meaning 30-year-old boxer, with very little to his name. Nothing but a roof over his head, with some pets to keep him company. Although not gifted mentally, probably due to lack of education, he's a man with a lost potential in boxing, as he's never capitalised on it in his life. The film demonstrates this in its first scene. Rocky opens on the triumph of an orchestra, with the giant letters of the titular character scrolling across the screen, to then have this contrasted against two men railing on each other in a dingy boxing ring in an old rundown church. The opening victory music can never live up to what is then a poor display of brutality. The reality of his life not even coming close to the title of the film. Rocky, despite winning, his victory is not celebrated by the crowd. Instead, he's called a bum. His opponent Spider also reasons it was luck.
You really got lucky today.
For a man who through grit and hard-headedness managed to beat his opponent, he's looked at as lesser, with disrespect and contempt. Rocky, being a man used to fighting, doesn't exude much emotion. He often doesn't resort to anger or blame others. He does what he seems like he always does. Takes it on the chin and moves forward. The old school boxer approach. This opening tells us two things. One, from a narrative perspective, it shows the plight of Rocky's character. The other, from a masculine view, that winning means absolutely nothing. This is the first important lesson. Winning doesn't garner him respect both outside in the community and on the inside in boxing. Many people, mostly men, believe it's winning that shows to others you're worthy of praise, which leads them to take something as common as losing as a reason to never try something again. This is a false virtue, regularly peddled by corporations to sell you things that winners sponsor or use. Why it works is because it's close to the truth. The reality is, men and women respect people who challenge themselves time and time again, how they adapt to new challenges and overcome adversity. It's one of the reasons boxing icon Muhammad Ali was so popular and respected, as he took on all challenges, even the American government. Keep in mind, nearly all champions and serial winners were once amateurs and underdogs in their own sports as well. That is to say, they grew up losing and used that to eventually win. Forgive this tangent, but it's important to the point. It's funny, or perhaps ironic, Rocky uses boxing to illustrate this, as the sport itself is plagued by the precedent of having to be undefeated in order to be successful, which this film itself goes to undermine, with Rocky a bum almost beating the undefeated champion. No one is invincible. Boxing, by their own making, has propagated this lie, which has put the sport in decline for decades. This is because now, stupidly, it makes it that the best rarely fight each other, or when they do, it's for the reason they have very little to lose. Amusing when you realise it creates the false narrative that people are great because they never lose. So you create a system where people tune in to watch you fight because they think you might get beaten, and are actually annoyed when you've won. So you have a fandom based on hating your best fighters, which is just bizarre. Then over time, the public only remembers you for your defeats and not for your achievements. For example, the great George Foreman pulled off possibly the greatest ever sporting comeback, winning the boxing heavyweight title at 45 years old, the oldest man ever to do so.
It happened! It happened!
While the boxing history books will remember him for that, the fact is, most people know him from his grill, or the fact that he lost to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle. Is this unfair? Absolutely. But the point being, it goes to show it's the challenge that is worth pursuing, not the win itself. Back to the movie. The film throughout never shies away from cold-hearted truths, which is the many number of lessons this film can teach. We need to accept the reality of our current life when it comes to being a man. Only then can we plan ahead to move past it. Now the film takes its time as we follow Rocky around. The rest of the credits appear with no fanfare, as Rocky walks the streets at night and shares greeting with singing hobos. The pathways and laneways are filthy, cold and lonesome. After what seems like a hard night, the only things to welcome Rocky at home are his 2 pet turtles. The movie is slow as well, not in a bad way like it's boring. That's not to say I wouldn't cut or change anything from the movie, but it's paced this way so we can get a sense of the oppression Rocky is under. It would be easy in a lot of these scenes to cut away to the next plot point. Probably would have made for a tighter, leaner, but ultimately a more generic movie. As is, it's easy to see the weight Rocky is under. Take this scene. Rocky catches himself in the mirror and compares that with the photo of him as a young boy. Is Rocky frustrated? Is it that the boy is full of hope and the man is not? Or is it because how similar they are? Rocky, despite being older, is that scared little boy inside. Or is it that he's alone in the photo and he's still alone, with literally only creatured comforts to keep him sane? Even Rocky's optimistic attitude can't break the loneliness in the air. Most people want to forget and distract themselves. In the film sense, we cut away, but Rocky doesn't. Rocky shows how most men deal with it. You just have to sit with it, be with yourself, alone, accept it and continue on. It's sad and intimate, but it's genuine. The lesson is right after this. Rocky, ironically, doesn't beat himself up over it. Instead, he puts his best foot forward, and the next day it goes to showing Adrian, a woman he's courting from a local pet shop. It's clear Adrian barely acknowledges Rocky's presence. She doesn't even look at him in the eye, or responds with the same one-word answer. I think another day in the past, Rocky would just be happy with that. However, today he decides he's going to make Adrian notice him. It's awkward and it's messy, but his crappy joke makes Adrian smile.
What? So shocked. You're so shocked. What do you think?
Now she seems to finally notice Rocky. You don't use hot feelings to dig yourself deeper, you twist them into action to help you become something better. That's not to say how dare Adrian not notice Rocky before, as if people are inherently deserving of attention from the people they're attracted to. Adrian is a shy and skittish woman, who seems lost in her own little bubble in the world. Understandably so, from anyone who had to work paycheck to paycheck, not to mention a rough part of town. And just from her brother Paulie's attitude, she may have also not had the best upbringing either. All this is to say that Adrian's lack of interest in Rocky and in dating, in general, is reasonable. I believe Rocky slowly learns throughout the film that life is hard for everyone, through people like Adrian, Paulie and Mick. It's just in different ways from his own. Next we learn Rocky is muscle for a local loan shark, and begins to intimidate a man by the dock. He's meant to break the guy's thumb, but in the end doesn't, which Mr. Garzo, the loan shark, isn't too pleased with. Also, the driver directly insults Rocky by calling him a meatbag. Obviously all this is to show that Rocky in truth is a kind-hearted man. Yet I also believe it illustrates that Rocky knows what true violence is, being a fighter his whole life. As such, he respects the power and danger, and so doesn't feel the need to wield it around so frivolously. It's why he can let such insults slide, because deep down he knows he could have his way with the driver if he wanted to. As such, he's secure in his ability to use force. Later the same man insults Adrian. Only then does Rocky come to resort to violence.
Take it to the zoo. I hear retards like the zoo.
Hey, this bum gotta say that.
All right, back it up,
buddy. I'm calling you a bum.
Because if you can't use your power to protect those who can't protect themselves, then what is the point in having it? A lesson to keep in mind. That's not to say he's not insecure. We can see this in the very next scene, when he arrives at his boxing gym. After being kicked out of his locker, he confronts Mickey. Without mincing his words, outright tells Rocky he's no good and should give up.
Got hard, but you fight like a goddamn ape. Nothing special about you, you never got your nose busted. Well, leave it that way, now shoot pretty and what's left of your mind.
Rocky was never going to achieve anything, so why is he wasting his time trying? Rocky could get angry and scream, or fold and give up. And if he did use the former, it probably goes without saying, but Mick is someone who will not be intimidated. Except Rocky doesn't. He uses it as motivation and heads straight back to the pet shop to talk to Adrian. From a certain lens, we could look at Rocky's behaviour as too forward or creepy, which has become a catch-all term for saying hello to the wrong person these days. Except the camera frames Adrian as a woman locked in a cage, and Rocky's actually just trying to get her to come out. His first attempt fails, but he keeps going. In another movie, Rocky would save the day, rescue her from a real creep, or sweep her off her feet with charm and appeal. Here it's different, it's more real. Rocky puts in time and effort because he sees something special in her. Perhaps it's something he thinks he's lost in himself, or he just understands how she's treated. Look at what her brother Paulie says about her.
She's a freaking loser. Hey. Sometimes she gets me so crazy, I could split her head with a razor.
Rocky's been treated the same way throughout the film. From a certain feminine perspective, people might get the impression Rocky wins over Adrian because deep down he's a good guy. That might be true about Rocky as a character, but has very little to do with it in my opinion. And that's not the lesson to take away here. Take the love story out of it, Rocky actually has a lot to offer Adrian from the outset. He's got a gentle manner to help her get over her shyness, his optimistic attitude to help her cope with her dreary life situation, protection from Paulie and a place to stay to get away from him, to just take her places and experience life, so on and so forth. Adrian also brings stuff to the table, and we'll get to them later. Once you show self-reflection and empathy for others, why you fail with women can become obvious. Men's desire to be loved often takes away their self-respect. They degrade themselves like a drug addict for attention. The women they give their attention to are often weak of mind and spirit. Both are on a path of self-destruction. The female just takes longer and is less evident. Ask a lot of young men what they have to offer as a person, and I'm shocked even their families put up with them. However, it has to be said, working hard continuously for a better outcome is tough, especially if you've not witnessed or experienced it firsthand, and you're asking people, especially young men, to do it more on belief than anything else, which they often have none, and is the exact reason for their problematic behaviour in the first place. Let's just use the film example. A couple of times throughout the film, Paulie says if he's late, Adrian will ring the hospital looking for him. Could be an exaggeration for some light humour, or could be true. Either way, you can infer a lot about him just from that statement. Paulie in a lot of ways represent men who are left to fester with no purpose, full of anger and hatred with no sense of control over it. They tend to implode on themselves and begin to point the finger. Their anger may well be justified, but they haven't the maturity to channel it in the right way. Rocky, on the other hand, who could start playing the blame game throughout the film, almost never does, with one exception, and even then he deals with it in a productive way. Rocky instead just tries harder next time. It's not the most elegant solution, but often the most practical ones never are. In fact, Rocky gets upset when the barman insults heavyweight champion Apollo Creed, saying he's a clown. However, Rocky admires that Apollo dreamed big and worked hard to achieve it, while the barman is happy to never take a big chance in life. With that said, Rocky and Paulie ain't too far away from each other. Rocky is also jaded by life. However, unlike Paulie, he's still a man of some integrity. As I've said, he's got a respect for violence. But a better example is this scene, when Marie, a young girl who's on a night out with a group of older guys, Rocky walks her home and explains what this behaviour will make her become. For his trouble, he's insulted and called a creep, ironically.
Screw you, creepo!
This is another fact about being a good man, is that doing the moral thing, the real moral thing, not just saying it, but actually living it, is, believe it or not, despite what many virtual signalling people will tell you, is often a thankless or smeared job. This scene being the case in point. I think we've all experienced this in our lives, where you try to do the right thing, and you've came off worse for it. Here, like Rocky at the end of the scene, you might start thinking it's easier to puppet a certain agenda, or just not get involved, than actually live by your own moral code. But as a man, you have to stand up for what you believe in, otherwise that code has no value. Rocky gets offered to fight the champion Apollo Creed. The challenger had picked up an injury, and unknown to Rocky, Apollo picked him because he liked his nickname, the Italian Stallion, nothing more. For the fight they need the novelty, a joke, and Rocky is the literal perfect punchline. To be fair, although we don't get to see much of Apollo, he seems like a decent guy. He tells children to stay in school, and he obviously does his best to entertain the fans, and he's got a champion's heart. But his confidence was skidding into arrogance, and that was almost his undoing here. Which is funny, because in Rocky 4 that's exactly what happens. Rocky gets invited over to Paulie's to take Adrian out for Thanksgiving, unbeknownst to Adrian. Now I'm not saying Paulie's behaviour is right here, as he tries to force Adrian by intimidation. However, this is the 70s, one could argue his behaviour is quite tame for the time. While the motives are all wrong, the sentiment is at least right. He just wants Adrian to start having a life. Most importantly though, she does not budge because of Paulie, It's because Rocky himself goes to the door and presents a few genuine kind-hearted words that convinces her. It's awkward as all hell, but we follow them on a date to the ice rink. It's Rocky's clumsiness and the candid nature talking about his life that makes the moment feel real. And there are little pieces here where we can see how they complete each other in a way. It's a little cringe, no doubt, but so is real life. Rocky is also very forward and direct, which by people with big egos would be off-putting. Yet, Rocky's directness is often diminished by his funny and gentle nature. As a man, it's important to be direct and self-assured, but Rocky shows if you're humble and your heart is in the right place, it's almost impossible to do or say the wrong thing. Following them back to Rocky's home, we can tell Adrian is embarrassed with herself for being in a man's apartment alone. So to make her feel better, Rocky embarrasses himself by shouting out the window to make a scene. As I've said, with the right mentality, it's hard to do the wrong thing. It's not a Cinderella moment, however I reason it's the sentiment that matters most. And Rocky continues to do a decent job to defuse the situation by being lighthearted. With that said, this would be the one scene where I'd make a slight change here and there, so Rocky doesn't look as forceful to get it on, so to speak. To be clear, the right intention is there. Rocky recognises that it's fear that's holding her back, so he squashes it as best he can, with her reciprocating in the end. At first glance, it does look too heavy-handed, and is one of the only scenes that seems like it's moving way too fast. As we've seen countless times by now, another great aspect Rocky has to him is his personality. He's got a humble optimism and a friendly cadence. Rocky could easily fall into despair when he looks at his life, his living situation and his prospects for a better future. But he doesn't. He maintains a small quiet voice that says, if I keep trying, things will get better. And throughout the movie they actually do. Everything we need to know about Rocky comes from one simple line in the film. When Rocky and Adrian go out, and it's this.
It's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, to you, but to me it's Thursday, right?
With no one to celebrate Thanksgiving with, for him it's just a normal day. It's the perfect encapsulation to say how alone he is. Rocky can take punishment well both in and outside the ring. As stated, he takes things on the chin and moves on. But Mickey really gets under Rocky's skin, because he sees straight through Rocky and often hits him with the plain cold-hearted truth like a decent father figure would.
Because you had the talent to become a good fighter, and instead of that, you became a leg breaker, some cheap second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
Rocky rarely has nothing to say in this film, but this scene is one of those times that shuts him up. A great part in the film is when Rocky is asked about fighting Apollo. He instantly refuses, not of humbleness, but out of respect for the champ, acutely aware of the skill difference. Only when he's told it's a chance of a lifetime does he seem to reluctantly agree. Rocky is also clever enough to recognise that since the fame he's gathered, because he's fighting the champion, that people will try to take advantage of him, so he opts to train himself. This is not to say that you have to do everything alone as a man. In fact, I would say being interdependent is better than outright independence. Being responsible for others often makes men hold themselves to higher standards. It's a subject I could spend far too long talking about, so without going into all that, suffice it to say, you just need to be careful with who you trust. Only when he genuinely trusts Adrian does he tell her the whole truth.
You know, I said that stuff on TV didn't bother me none.
Yeah?
Did.
And a lot of the film is this. It's all about speaking truth, telling the truth to others, telling the truth to yourself, not shying away from it, being pragmatic with it, and embracing it. Even when Mickey shows up to Rocky's house, he's a bit more jovial and a touch more respectful, no doubt. Yet he still has nothing but the truth to say to Rocky.
They got good records. They fight their guts out for peanuts. But you get a shot at the title.
And when he asks to be Rocky's manager, it's hard to blame Rocky for feeling petty, resentful and angry. It's clear he's been holding on to this for a very long time. However, how Rocky reacts is the key takeaway here. This is the one exception where Rocky lets his anger and resentment get the better of him, and Mickey realises very quickly that this isn't an argument, but a temper tantrum that Rocky's been holding on to for a long time, with Mickey having the maturity just to walk away. Rocky huffs and puffs for a while, does the whole woe was me act, but once he's vented, he humbles himself and lets his ego go and runs after Mickey to tell him yes. This is very important. Rocky doesn't let his pride get the better of him, even if it was justified in a sense. Yes, he's resentful and angry, but he lets it all out, decides to let it go, learns the lesson and moves on. Rocky, in its own franchise, has glorified discipline and hard work to comedic levels. Make no mistake, they're great virtues everyone should have. However, they make it seem like it's exciting, exhilarating and fun, when the truth is often the opposite. It's boring, tough, and both mentally and physically exhausting. Make no mistakes, the rewards that come down the line speak for themselves, but the idea that it's instantly gratifying is a myth. Discipline and hard work are predicated on belief more than anything else in the beginning. The author David Foster Wallace once said, "Acceptance is usually more a matter of fatigue than anything else, and is something that should be remembered if you want serious discipline in your life. You almost need to let hard work and discipline break that part of your brain that doesn't want to do it, until it submits. Then knowing there's no getting out of it, your brain will start to find the pleasure in it, enjoying the process over time, with you becoming better and better, or things just becoming easier. This is the only film I get the sense of the discomfort of what hard work looks like, with how tough it shows Rocky's workout routine in the beginning. A cold 4 in the morning start, to a pint glass of eggs, with workout clothes that should be burned, to then start a long agonising run while everyone else sleeps. No upbeat music here, just a soft piano through the cold light of the morning day. This is the paraphrased real life version. Rocky looks as if he'd rather be doing anything else. It's hard and it's not fun, and there's no one there to tell you to push harder or good job at the end. The famous punching the meat scene comes about because Paulie begins to square off against Rocky after Rocky takes offense to what Paulie says about Adrian, with Rocky punching the meat to show how bad of an idea it would be to actually fight him. It's important to note, and what people often forget about the message of this film, that only after putting in a serious amount of hard work does Rocky start to think he might have a chance. He starts beginning to believe in himself. It's also important to note that Rocky didn't do it alone. He had Adrian and Mickey. Adrian helped Rocky through compassion. For example, she gets Rocky a dog to help him run. And while I'm here, it's not just Adrian helping Rocky. Rocky helps Adrian come out of her shell and makes her stand up for herself as well. Mickey, on the other hand, helped Rocky through discipline and not taking no for an answer. The relationship between the two is not unlike a mother and father dynamic, with Rocky filling the last piece by having the heart and determination to do it. I want to be precise here. Rocky always had the power to change his situation, and he was making very small steps in the right direction. He also needed the right kick to keep him going. Adrian is that kick. She's the reason he's got to actually go out and make something with his life, and the film sets up a scenario with the exhibition fight in order to prove that. It's important to note that Rocky does not know about the fight until about an hour into the movie, and by this stage he's already started on the path to putting his life back together. The running montage has become so iconic, with Rocky running the steps and raising his hands in the air, that people take it literally, that running up said steps is achieving something, undermining the movie's message, when the reality they forget is about trusting that your hard work, planning, routine and discipline all pays off in the end. People have boiled down the movie and got it twisted, saying it's about believing in yourself, an oversimplification. For example, I might believe that I would be able to run a 4-minute mile, but without skills like discipline, self-motivation, diet and exercise, that belief has no merit. The movie plainly shows it's only when Rocky has been doing all the hard work and it begins paying off, does he actually begin to believe in himself. This is the most important message. Rocky only believes when he shows the qualities to justify said belief. All this is to say, whatever you want to achieve in life, start small with the qualities that are needed to achieve such a thing, and work to develop them. This hard work and discipline gives Rocky back his self-esteem, which is why he's not happy for the poster having the wrong coloured trunks. And guess what? The promoter doesn't even care. Just another reason for Rocky to try harder. If you listen to interviews with incredibly successful people, you might think good or bad things happen because you made the right singular choice. With interviews asking silly questions like, what's the one thing that made you successful? or vice versa. The truth is, it's a series of small mistakes before great fall. Thankfully, the opposite is also true, where you need only to continue to do the little things to improve your life exponentially. This brings us to the final fight, which I have to say is probably the weakest part of the film, and where it shows its budget and age the most. That's by no means saying it's bad, far from it. It just can't escape the sense of a pantomime feeling of a real fight, an issue I think only the Rocky Balboa film got right. However, once again, it's the sentiment that makes it work, with the corner scenes, the round montage, and the fight commentary that brings it to life. Both men are beaten to a pulp by the end. Rocky's face is nothing but pain and suffering. This brings us back to the main question: why? Why do something like this to yourself? This might give the false impression that Rocky fights for his life against Apollo to win or to prove the haters wrong, in which you've missed the entire point of the film. The point for Rocky was never extrinsic, it was intrinsic. It was for self-respect, to prove he had something special within him. Adrian gave him a reason to prove it to himself. Rocky fully accepts he can't win. Then why try? Why try if all you're going to do is get hurt? For pride? Pride will get you and the people you love seriously hurt or killed. Does it even matter? As it really doesn't matter if Rocky loses. He was a nobody before, so what difference does it make? And therein lies the point. Rocky fights for the very reasons he shouldn't. He can't win, it is too tough, and it's going to hurt. But when you believe you're worth something, it's your right to prove it. Rocky was meant to lose. He was meant to be beaten, mangled and forgotten about. Because others are more and he is less. Another shadow in the proud light cast by others. But instead he tries to become more. To become the combination of all the pieces of himself. The bravery, the kindness, the humility, the funny part and the sad. And strive to achieve something great. Not for pride. His pride was beaten and slowly drained away. If he had anything to begin with. Not for others. No one even gave him a chance to begin with. Until the night before the fight, he truly didn't even know what he was fighting for. So what then? Self-respect. A self-respect of mind, body and spirit. To know all three can break, but when ensured in oneself, together, can never truly be broken. When you've accepted the self, you press forward anyway. When you've gained purpose, you understand suffering and hardship are part of the package. It's the acceptance that your life is worth something, and as such, should be fought for, regardless of the circumstances. But what makes it worth something? Your life has meaning by what it affords. To love and to be loved. To care and to be cared for. To give and to take. To be happy and sad. To understand what we do with our life is meaningful and should be fought for to the bitter end. Not at least to prove you valued it. In a movie of non-stop great scenes and quotes, it's hard to pick a favourite. But for me, it has to be this one here.
Good luck.
Don't leave town.
Why it's my favourite? Because despite being about to fight the champion, all he cares about is that Adrian doesn't leave town. Losing and being brutally beaten is nothing compared to his soulmate leaving and him ending up alone. So we've reached the aftermath. Rocky has proven himself to himself and is complete by the end, with Adrian in his arms. So what's the answer then? Why be a good man? This is where many click off the video when I say the answer. It's tough to say this with any dignity or importance, that the answer is for love. A word that has become so cheapened and commercialised over time, does it even mean anything anymore? But how do we overcome loneliness, hatred, anger and resentment? How do we justify hard work, telling the truth and doing your very best? How do we continue to go on when there's nothing but doom and gloom around us? We see love is not an answer, but a truth and a virtue. Now it wouldn't sit right with me if I wasn't going to explain it, so here it goes. The message isn't as simple as find someone you love and become a man for them. Oh, do I wish it was that easy. The fact is, no one can make you become a man. The best others can do is encourage you or point you in the right direction. The unfortunate reality is, you have to do it on your own. Rocky may have been a mess by the time he met Adrian, but all the pieces were there. He was tough, brave, and he was willing to fight if needs be. Yet he was also kind-hearted, humble and warm. She gave him a reason to put them all together, to finally respect himself enough in order to fight for it for once. The ultimate truth to find out what a man is deciding to become a failure, because parts of you need to die so new ones can flourish. The anger, the resentment, the ego, all these and so much more need to be eradicated or put in its place, and it's only the harshness of life that can teach you that, so we all must fail before we can succeed. The reality check is to wake up every day knowing it's going to hurt, knowing you will struggle, yet you continue to try. Try to fulfill your dreams, ambitions. Try to improve your life and current situation. After all that pain and misery, you'll realise life is cold, colder than you could ever imagine. So you'll seek warmth. You'll realise love is that warmth. But love is not a fire, not in the beginning. It's an ember we can't catch, and if we do, we'll smother at any chance we'll get. Because we're naive, incompetent, selfish, prideful, envious, and egotistical. We couldn't look after ourselves, so what possible chance could we have to look after others? But now, after all our pieces have been either removed, sharpened, and refined through hardship, we cultivate the ember into a flame like no other. That flame becomes a love that makes us whole, a man with purpose. And if Rocky teaches us anything, you too can become that man. All it takes is a new version of yourself willing to do it. And the only special thing about that version of you is that it's willing to continue to try, no matter what. Become that version, become that man. This has been Jamie on Rocky and Masculinity, and if you've made it this far into the video, I want to thank you for watching.
I just want to say one thing to my wife who's home. Yo, Adrian! I did it!